Yeah, good morning also from my side, and a warm welcome to the SVG Europe Production Summit, and welcome to our first panel. And before we begin, thanks to Ross for sponsoring this session, great choice. With me on stage, Joe Ormston, IMG, Peter Angell, Sunset+Vine, Larissa from LaraMedia. Yes, perfect. You formed a new company, and Mike Darcey. And Mike, thank you very much for your keynote. There's nothing much to say, but we have to unpack it now. And I changed my script already, let's say, while I'm listening to you. And that's why we go with the flow. I hope there's hope for the production industry. And I think even rights costs are rising still. They are not flat, they're rising. Audiences are fragmentating. We are producing and we are flooding the market with a lot of content. And we have to discuss it, how we can use, and this is the session, smarter, faster, leaner. Smarter with the help of AI and data, and faster from the live production to the fan directly, and leaner with workflows that scale. How we can attract all the demographics, all the markets with our content we are producing, and is more always better? So this is all about the session. We have 40 minutes, and let's dive in. Mike, to follow up, let's say, on your keynote, do you see a benchmark out there where more is not always better, and you see, let's say, that leagues or federations or broadcasters reducing the amount of content they're pumping into the market on purpose? Is there any benchmark?
I think that's really difficult. I think in a competitive market in which there are no sort of barriers to entry, you'll tend to see output expand, and it is the way of the world. I think for many years there were certain restrictions on the output levels in our industry, whether it be spectrum or other, a limited number of platforms, which in a sense, brought a certain degree of order, and much of that has broken down. And we are, as I said at the end, in a very sort of boisterously competitive market now with very few barriers to entry, and so you will see output expand. And it's very hard for any one individual player to think, gosh, it would all be a lot simpler if we could all just agree to restrict output a bit, and then we could retain order. But that's called a cartel, and you're not allowed to do that.
No.
So I don't think that's happening. And so I don't think any individual supplier is in a position to take a view that, well, I will restrict output and just tighten up here, because everybody else isn't going to play along, and so you're going to go backwards. And so a competitive market just inherently brings that pressure to expand output. And I think that's the driver of the world we see today.
Joe, from your perspective, or the IMG perspective, is more content always better?
Well, it's interesting, isn't it? What we are working towards, our business model has changed from a purely transactional model to something where we work with federations and leagues to help them grow their offering. It's a case of, yes, a lot of content, because we want to engage different audiences, and how we view things has changed, and we have to offer that up. So there is opportunities for, there is obviously a lot of content, and it continues to grow, but we don't see that as a bad thing at all. It's just how you deliver that and how you creatively deliver it, and feed the multi-generational eyeballs that we have to do these days, because people are watching the live sport, but those ages are getting older, because the young generations seem to be watching small bite-sized moments, and that's what we've got to deliver.
Thank you. Peter, I know you have, let's say, very different thoughts on the content flooding. What is your perspective? How do you see it from a Sunset+Vine perspective of, let's say, if it comes to production models, revenue streams, and what's happening in the bus in the market by saying, okay, we have to flood every pipeline, every content with platform with content?
Yeah, thank you. Afternoon, everybody. So it's certainly what we see, along with, I think, the rest of the industry, is as Mike has already spoken about, that the increase in volume of content is, we've never known this kind of before, and it's driven by technology, I think, largely. So I think the problem that we have is, distribution technology has now changed, so there's no limitation on the amount of content one platform can distribute, and that's really cheap to do, on the one hand, and on the other hand, the cost of the means of production has reached a level that nobody's ever seen before. So the means of production is now entirely democratized. Literally anybody can buy a few £1,000s worth or euros worth of equipment and go out and create content, and it will look like content. Might not be very good, but it will look like content, and there'll be a few cameras and some graphics and a commentator or something, and all of a sudden you've got a live sports production. And I think the rights owners and the rights holders in our current kind of value chain or value matrix have really sort of embraced that, and now we've ended up with too much content, as Mike's been saying, which is not produced to a particularly high standard. And I think in the end that's going to be counterproductive. Now, we're in a generation which is driven by the streamers, really, of being prepared to try and fail, and I think that's totally okay. That you try something new, you experiment, it works, it doesn't work. If it doesn't work, you move on, but if it does work, you keep on doing that, and you find it's kind of a limit. And I think we're at the beginning of that, but I do feel that the audience isn't growing at or the addressable audience isn't growing at the same rate as the volume of available content. So if you have every game in your league is suddenly available live, it's not like you've got 10 times the audience you had when you just had one game. You've still got the same audience. You're now diluting it and fragmenting it across 10 games. And I'm not sure that necessarily is going to drive value in the long term. A pretty core pillar of economic theory is that scarcity creates value. And we're at the opposite end of that equation right now. There's no scarcity of anything. And just a very final point I think is worth just mentioning to frame a little bit the discussion. If we only use things like the NBA and the NFL and the Premier League and World Cup as the benchmark for the discussion, as the case study, we're going to get a totally skewed kind of analysis, because absolutely for the NFL, slicing and dicing everything and selling the same thing 10 times to different people, that absolutely creates value for them. But that's not the reality for, I think, most leagues or most rights owners outside of the very, very top of the pyramid. So that's sort of my take on off the top of it.
Yeah. Larissa, from your point of view, because at the end of the let's move a little bit into technology, because AI and cloud is always pitched as the efficiency layer at the end of the day. And are those, let's say, workflows, obviously they're helping to scale and they're helping to cascade the things. What is your point of view, let's say, if it comes to technology and at the end of the day, the different layers of how we produce content for the different platforms? Is it only about efficiency, or how you sell some a CEO or CFO the new cloud or the AI tool?
I think that the crux is, if we're just producing more content, it's probably just solving the wrong problem. But if we use what we do have now, which is AI, or particularly agentic AI, we can reach these different segments that we want to target, right? Just before we heard, you were saying we have actually, it's, we have more, it's growing, there are more people out there. It's at the moment more like, how can we reach those? So we all agree, personalization of content. If we have great curation of the content, we also can make that more emotionally resonating. And AI can help us with this. We will reach different segments. The catch is, though, that when we want to do that and when we want to do agentic AI, we need cloud. We just know since August, Devoncroft released a report where we know that cloud adoption stalled. So apart from Sky probably and a couple of the bigger ones, we don't have that huge adoption for cloud. So that leaves the broadcasters a little bit behind, because AI and cloud always go together. But you need the cloud to really make that scale. And just as when we think about how can we further experiment and look at how can we target these fans better, do we actually know where they are? It's all of the data that we do need. So once we have the data and we are really auditing our data well, we can align our AIs, our agents, to really target that and create out of one pipeline something for the casual viewer. Think about a cycling race. You have, for some people, this is very because they're big fans, they do understand it. I'm more casual, I need somebody that explains it to me more, and then you have the short-form content from Gen Z. And if you can create one pipeline that's gonna like push out all of that, and you also know where to reach your fans at the end, then this is really it. So I think we're in this experimental phase, and I think the possible solution for that is if there is a strategic steering for both the cloud and the AI, ideas that we want to put into the different companies so that we can really reach at the end what we want to target.
Okay, but nevertheless, I mean, we are now producing more content. We can produce it in a smarter way, in a leaner way, but nevertheless, we have to monetize it. Mm-hmm. So this is actually the problem. How to monetize, Mike, maybe to your point, is this actual rights models in the market. Is this a sustainable business model if it comes to more content on platforms and how to monetize it? What is your view from a, let's say, very independent, let's say, observation into the market? Are we have the right sustainable business models and rights models existing? Or are we, let's say, battling something we don't know where we end at the end of the day?
Yeah, look, I mean, I think across the television industry, the dominant model that is emerging is a combination of subscription and advertising. Pretty much across the board, people who are trying to exist on just one and not the other are going to struggle. But I think that is an economic model that's still got an enormous amount of power and can fund all of this. The emphasis is different in different countries. The US has got more advertising in the story because a lot of the US sports have more ad breaks, and so there's more potential to monetize the advertising side. European sports have fewer breaks, and we tend to lean more heavily on the subscription side. But across the board, it's those two working in tandem. I think if you're a solely free-to-air outlet, then I think you can't compete for the big stuff. And you're left with picking up the stuff that the pay-funded guys don't want, which is fine, and there can be a good business in that, and there's, that's fine, but you just have to pay an amount that's commensurate with the economic model you've got. But I think it's sustainable, yeah.
What is your view on that, Joe, from an IMG perspective?
Well, I'm the IMG Studios side of it, so I'm not involved with the rights deals. But it is being fragmented. I think in the future we will see it go more towards global or into the streamers. We're second guessing this at the moment, but that's kind of the way that we see it going, just because there's money there. And that's another reason why we're looking at working with the federations and the leagues, so we can offer that proposal to give them the opportunity to be always on. As you say, you have to be pushing your brand forward, and to deliver it to another outlet where you can give it to them packaged and they can have control of it and their own narrative, to make sure that they are building up their stars. So that's the other thing, new viewers or younger viewers don't necessarily follow teams or leagues, they're following stars, and they would jump around. So it is actually talking to them on different levels. It's the TikTok generation. You have to make that content that's available to the mainstream broadcasters, put it out, have a digital strategy and distribution, and give the whole package to move it forward.
But this could be a problem, to be honest, because let's make it clear. At the end of the day, every athlete is a broadcaster now.
Yep.
And I'm questioning then the business model for rights holders, but also, let's say, for legacy broadcasters. This is a problem. It becomes a problem, right?
Yeah, absolutely. And I think, so what you see is, like in every industry, really, you have legacy brands and challenger brands. And we come from legacy brands in broadcasting, good old linear broadcasters, whether they were pay or free, and that model is changing now. There's also the legacy of how rights are sold. So I would say that on the rights owner side, the people that are selling the rights, they're totally stuck in a legacy model, which was based on something that was driven by technology 40 or 50 years ago, where you could only broadcast in a geographical area around where you were. So you sell rights on a national basis. It's completely made up now, right? I mean, there's no way you would do that if you were going to start again. You wouldn't sell rights separately by country. You might sell them by language, or you just might sell them globally, because there's no restriction on sort of distribution anymore. And that's what the challengers are able to do. So if we think the athletes, like Cristiano Ronaldo with paddle, that kind of thing, they're not worried about just buying the rights to Spain or something, or Portugal or wherever. They just put it on YouTube and it goes everywhere. And I think there's a bit of a failure to understand both the opportunity and the problem on the rights owner and the agency side. And I've been in the agency world all my life. That the opportunity isn't around trying to perpetuate the business model that we've had and trying to make that model fit into our new technology structure. It's about going, well, let's forget about that. And I think that's where the globalization of rights sales is going to come from, and it's going to start at the top, where in the next few years, at some point, somebody, one of the streamers probably, is going to buy a top-tier sports property globally in one go and own the whole thing. That would make complete sense, right? And then do it in as many languages as they want to do. This is where AI is really going to help, because you can do simultaneous translation in real time of voice, so that solves that problem. English is kind of become the de facto language outside of China, really, and South America probably, for all sports broadcasts. So, that we're taking that pain away. So I think it's ripe for globalization, really. And I think that's where the opportunity in production is really going to come from, to embrace the systems for doing that. And it's going to start at the top of the pyramid. But at the same time, we need to think about the bottom of the pyramid. And I still question whether all of this content that gets created at really, really low budgets to quite a low production quality level really helps drive the audience. And you mentioned women's sport earlier, Mike, where you now got for the Women's Super League in the UK, for example, every match is produced and distributed live. Does that make it better? I mean, 5-6 camera coverage produced for a very, very low fee. Is that really what people want to watch, rather than just pick one match a week, put 20 cameras on it, make it look amazing, make it look better than the Men's Premier League, and drive your audience that way? Is that really better?
Although I've got to speak up here, I'm sorry. How will you know if you've got the audience if you don't deliver it?
Well, this is the experimentation bit, so I totally get why.
And it's also an amazing platform to train new people coming into the industry and finding new presenters and new voices. And so if we don't do this on entry-level sports and taking a punt on things, we'll never know.
Yeah.
Absolutely.
Yeah.
I fully agree. And Larissa.
I wonder if there is a way for the broadcasters and also the other production companies to do a step back and look at what everybody can do best. Because I don't think that a traditional broadcaster is probably the best one to produce short-form content and put it on their own YouTube channels, but then leave that to somebody that can do that. And when it comes back to the federations, probably that's a possible way to look at how can you split the rights, so you leave it actually, so you get the best of the best out of the market. So when you give short form content, you produce it for Sunset, but you do it through their channels. Probably as a legacy broadcaster, you want to step out of that business and just leave it there. But if you want to do the top-notch Champions League final, everybody wants to watch that, then you want to give this to somebody where you have the understanding that they will deliver the production value that you could. But it starts with the rights on the rights owner side to kind of give that, and instead of like giving it all and us all trying to do everything and solve everything and shooting around just a big bunch of content, into really looking at what are the different personas that we want to target within the market.
Yeah, but on the other, I fully agree. But let's face it from a realistic point of view, from a broadcaster point of view. Your supermarket is getting larger and larger and larger, and you have your 10 poles where you have to produce with super. And this is, by the way, tech giants entering the market. They don't start on tier 4 rights. They start with tier 1. So they bring the 30, the 50, the whatsoever cameras on site. On the other side, it is expecting that a YouTuber is, let's say, stream. So the adaptation you have to have as a legacy broadcaster or a new entry is to create an ecosystem which covers everything. So from a Sunset+Vine perspective, how you are shifting, let's say, balancing this between deliver more for less, at the same time you're bringing tier production for tech giants in. So is this requiring a different mindset in the entire organization, or are you, let's say, anyway saying, okay, I don't care, it's content?
100% different. I mean, it's almost to the extent where I'm wondering if it's even possible, right? Because I mean, I think Sunset+Vine and IMG and us legacy production houses that have been around a long time, that went through the boom years of sports rights fees and the production budgets that came along with that. We kind of come from the top down, right? We're from the 80s or the 90s, that kind of thing, at least Sunset+Vine. And IMG. So, you know, we've got a view on how sport should be produced. The challengers in this market are a younger generation that never knew about all of that never knew what an OB van was, or, you know, what an EVS machine was. They kind of start off with going, well, can I shoot this on an iPhone? No. Can I shoot it on 2 iPhones? No. All right, maybe I need an SLR. Okay, I can do that. And then you build up a bit of vMix and a bit of Simply Live and a bit of this, that, and the other, and all of a sudden you're on air for 5,000 euros worth of investment, and you're making content. And until recently, that was perceived as not enough quality. But now the pressure on pricing means, well, all of a sudden, yeah, we'll kind of live with that for, you know, some of the startup kind of leagues. So you've got this, you know, you've got this pressure. You know, we're looking at that thinking, well, how do we play like that? And, you know, almost to the conclusion that, well, unless there's a real volume in it, what's the point? And we're not well placed to do that, and it means a big adjustment in the way we sort of do business. So, you know, is there a layer, a strata in that market where we should just leave that to the people that are best at it? I don't just mean from the production company point of view, but from the technology companies, you know, from whether you're a big NEP or you know, you've got NEP and Gravity are talking later on. I think this is probably going to be a subject of discussion. How do you do the premium stuff up here, Amazon and Netflix, and how do you do the real low-cost stuff that goes straight to YouTube down here? You know, I think that's a huge problem, and I don't think any of us are really working out how to solve it yet.
And Joe, this is from also, let's say, from a business development point of view.
Absolutely.
How do you want to develop the business then?
Yeah, and that's what we've done. We've looked at the way we do things. So we look at things with a digital lens. We look at things at different price points. We look at the way we can speak to fans across all the different age brackets. And it's coming up with the best solutions. And it's not just offering up the traditional way of doing things, because we have to be agile. You know, unfortunately, the money doesn't go as far. But it is finding the solutions, and also working, as I said, with the leagues and the federations to introduce different ways of looking at it. And it might be like using gymnastics as you know, as an example. There is an audience out there. They can't afford the traditional big OB size of things, but the way technology is moving, and we have to be across that and use it and experiment with it to make sure that these other sports can have a platform.
Larissa, from your point of view, are we addressing as, let's say, the industry? Are we having the right question and answers to exactly those new business developments? Or, let's say, are we bashing with the old methodology, let's say, by saying, okay, a server is a server, I don't care, it has 8 outputs, and it is what it is. What is your thought on that?
I think there is a lot of old mentality still around, and I think getting back to your supermarket analogy, because I think there's just, you know, there is a couple of Walmarts, and that's Walmart, and then you have Albert Heijn, because we're in the Netherlands. These are the big ones. They have most of the choice, but how do they win? They only win about price. It's a price race. So the question is, you can't have price and quality. It doesn't work, right? So it's either, as a broadcaster, you go into the price race and you do everything, but then very cheap, and you do the whole line, or you pick out your premium segment and you produce this because this is what you can do best. And this is, I think, where we are in, because we are in the top notch, I guess, within the audience of what is produced here in Europe, what is produced in the world, and not, let's say, the complete, you know, the YouTubers and so on. However, if we can stick to what we are good in, probably that's the way out. But we don't need to become all Walmarts.
Mike?
Yeah, just a comment. I mean, this is not a unique problem.
No.
This is not the first industry to grapple with this. Clay Christensen wrote about this quite a long time ago. And, you know, an incumbent industry finds that there are scrappy entrants offering cheap but very low quality alternatives at the margins. You ignore them at the beginning, and, you know, the problem is they gradually get better. And then they start to challenge the incumbents in the middle ground, and then, you know, potentially for the top end as well. So it's very dangerous to ignore, but it's also very hard to know exactly what the optimal response is. And you know, my instinct is that, and it's hard for incumbent organizations to do this, it's to continue to play the premium game where that is really what is wanted. But within the same organization, can you play at that lower end as well? And in a sense, have that sort of startup, scrappy mentality and learn to play that way too. That's the hard part. But it's been hard every time every industry has gone through this.
But let's be honest. How many disruptors do you have in your organization? Disruptive, really thinkers by saying, okay, I'm not questioning the Tier A operation because it's bread and butter business, but I'm questioning the business model for lower tier and scalable workflows in the organization.
Yeah.
Let's be honest, and also let's say in the vendors sitting in this room, how many YouTubers are sitting in a boardroom?
Exactly, no one.
No. Why?
Although YouTube,
Or let's say
yeah,
content creator.
content
I
creators.
don't want to mention always the platform YouTube.
Yeah.
Content creators.
We are working on that. Honestly, we are, and we are thinking about different ways of creating different content that supports the mainstream. It's all very new, but we also don't believe that cheaper means it's bad quality. You need to be more creative. And we've invested in our creative team at IMG. We were very much a sausage factory where we just did world feeds and pumped it out, and that has changed over the last few years, and we've done a lot of work on that. So, we are working on it. We need to do more. We're working with influencers about creating different sorts of content that speak to a different audience. And even, I think we all know that CBS does an amazing Champions League product, even though none of us watch it, but it gets lots and lots of column it just because it's so amazing. But for the Champions League final, we also did a watch along. So that spoke to a different audience, although they were a rights holder and Tom Cruise and David Beckham were actually at the venue.
But again, I think, and this is my point, if you went to a, let's say, meeting and say, let's work on 4 different incremental streams from a Champions League final. One for your traditional customer base, then you have someone for the content creators, the new age, and so forth. And you're entering the room but you're discussing the same workflows with the same people, discussing the Tier A, and now they have to rethink the Tier 4. I probably guess total cost of ownership, it will not be cheap. So what do we have to do different? Also to address, let's say, all the vendors here, and this is SVG, we have to serve our sponsors and the industry. What shall we do if, let's say, walking through the floor tomorrow and saying, okay guys, I have my traditional Tier A, I have tons of other products, I don't want to have over-engineering, my total cost of ownership on the YouTube stream or whatsoever must be 2%. Are we doing this enough, Peter?
So, from an S&V perspective, I mean, it's not that we don't go out and look for the kind of high volume business. We don't win a lot of it. And there's 2 main reasons for that. One is that we look at all of it on a very creative level, as Joe, you've just been talking about. So we kind of really think about, as we do for everything that we make, because our reputation rests on the quality of our output, we really think about how do we make this amazing. And, we know we can't spend all the money that we normally do with a legacy broadcaster or with a streamer, but, how are we going to make this work? So we put together an amazing bid. It looks amazing. It's budgeted. All looks fine. 2 things generally happen. Nobody reads the creative part because they're not interested, and they only focus on the budget because that's the only exclusive criteria they're going to use to select who they're going to work with, number 1. And number 2, when you're at that end of the scale, the proportion of the budget that is formed by the technical or the technology contribution that we're getting from suppliers in this room is going to be somewhere between 70 or 65, 75%, something like that. So the entire success or failure of my budgeting rests on how little money you guys in the technology business can provide your service for, because my budget in production will be director, producer, a bit of graphics, hotels, transport, and the OB. And the OB and power and all that kind of thing, it's going to be the most expensive part. So in the end, my budget is driven by, my production budget is driven largely by how little can you deliver the technology solution for. And I think this is where, the industry kind of is going to risk eating itself a little bit, because we as a production community are spending all of our time trying to find ways that you can drive your price ever lower. Because, we're talking about doing, more for less. Nobody ever said do less for more, right? And if you've got a fixed budget and lowering technology costs, you've got two choices. You can either do more with the technology and keep the budget the same, or you can do the same as you've always been doing and drop the budget. And everybody's always dropping the budget. So our challenge is, certainly from S&Me, but I think it's not just with our company, it's everybody.
Everybody, yeah.
In this race to the bottom, unfortunately, the people in the front line who are going to get shot first are the technology providers.
Larissa?
Isn't there a way to look at how we could...
I know we're shocking, sorry. I know.
It was a tough message.
And we are not doomed, so all good. There's hope.
No, but isn't there a way, while still doing that, to go into more co-creation? I think one of our biggest challenges today is that we don't know the fans. We know our legacy fans, our subscribers, if you have Take TV, but many of the others, broadcasters, they don't even know that because they don't own the identity layer, right? They don't know who is my fan, what are they doing, and where can I find them? So now we're shooting all of these different budgets and whatever we have on a certain crowd where we don't know enough about. But what we do know, that the YouTubers out there, they're reaching probably 50, 100,000 people on that. But why would we like to start replicating this instead of just starting to more co-create that? I think many of us are, and I'm including myself, I'm not a big expert when it comes to that market, but it's inevitable that we are going to work with them. So the question is, do we leave it to them entirely, or can we do something closer with them, and then also probably not have a huge budget that we need to spend there, but have it so that it's adequate and we can keep the rest for our premium stuff.
I ask you my question again. How many content creators, YouTubers do you have in your organization? Mike, is cooperation the key, maybe?
Sorry.
Cooperation?
With
different kind of content creators to find the right balance between costs, viewership, and experimentation.
Yes, I think so. But it is a tricky thing because there are, big cultural disparities between those two worlds. But they will have to work together. Like I think it's, we should also be a little bit careful here because I mentioned at the end there that the NFL did an experiment, with the opening Friday game of this season, and it played the game in Brazil, Kansas City Chiefs. So all the Taylor Swift angles in play. But they did it on YouTube, and they had multiple outputs with content creators. The numbers were pretty disappointing, actually. They had 16 million streams in the US, whereas the Thursday night game on good old NBC and Peacock, did more like 28 million. So, look, I don't think that means it's a bad idea. I think that means, there's a lot more experimenting to do here. Maybe there's something wrong in the way that they did it, or not optimal. Maybe it is just a different audience, and they're not, one versus the other. Maybe you just do have to have both going in combination. But it's not as simple as, we just need bigger audiences, whack it on YouTube with a content creator, boom. Apparently it's more complicated than that.
Yeah, I think as well, so discoverability is the problem here, right? So, and on a macro level, you're most discoverable on YouTube. Problem is, YouTube, and I don't know what the stats are now, but it used to be like every second of the day there was like 5 hours of new content was uploaded to YouTube. So you've got to know what you're looking for on YouTube, and a good way to find that is to follow the influencers and the creators that you like, and they will point you towards the content that you want to have. And I think YouTube are getting better at understanding a business model there, but they're still taking a massive cut. And the ultimate problem, if you're a rights owner, is you go into an arrangement like that with a pretty fixed idea of what your cost base is, but no clue about the variability of your revenue base. So it might work, it might not work. So that might have cost NFL money. It probably didn't with YouTube in this case, but you just simply don't know. And if you're making...
I don't think they were doing that for the revenue.
Yeah,
I think they've got enough money in the bank. This was about fan base.
Yeah, exactly. But I mean, I think the point is still the same. If whatever you spend on on creating content that you know is ultimately going to go on YouTube. If you're not the NFL, then your deal with YouTube is going to look a bit like a regular creator deal, you know, where you're going to be giving half of your ad revenue that they're determining, you're going to give it straight to Google, right? So, and you've got the variability component of your revenue, and you've got to be really clear about why you're doing those things, or why you're doing those things. So, a few months ago, the big saying was that, you know, the streaming wars are over and YouTube won. YouTube haven't won the streaming wars. They've just won the very first battle, and it may be a completely insignificant one that doesn't matter anymore.
Okay, we're getting to the end. To be honest, I not followed my script. This is crazy. We did a prep call, and anyway, I destroyed myself in 30 seconds. Anyway, let's have a last. Let's use the last 2 minutes, 2.5 minutes to have, let's say, one final thought. In 5 years' time, what do you think? Who's owning the European broadcasting, let's say, ecosystem? Is it more the tech giants, the broadcasters, the federations? What is your thought on that? Or is it a combination of everything, and we're sitting here and talking about literally the same?
Possibly. In 5 years.
In 5 years' time, Joe?
Maybe in 10 years, I think it will be a very different landscape. It may even be a streamer that we've never heard of that comes to the front. We have no idea because it's moving so quickly. I think it will go more towards the streaming model. That's where my money is. Peter?
Yeah, I think I agree with that probably for the first time I'm agreeing with anybody today, but it's okay.
Well, at least.
But what I do think is that premium will win in the end. The top level content, the only thing that delivers anything like proper audience on legacy media at the moment is sport. You know, there's nothing else that does it. I think like 19 of the top 20 free-to-air broadcasts in the US are all NFL by audience. You know, on the BBC, for the English amongst you, the women's, helped that England won it, but the Women's Euros is a top-rated show on TV this year and probably will remain so for the whole year. And actually, S&V produced that, but that's a side issue. We're very proud of that. But, you know, nevertheless, sport rates, and it's premium level, right? So if you... I believe that we're going to go through this phase of the high volume, low quality stuff. We'll kind of get that out of the way and we'll settle back down to making good content, because whichever age group you are, you know, premium still works. I mean, Game of Thrones worked in that age group for a reason. They didn't have to pay for it, but nevertheless, they worked out that it was good quality content they wanted to watch.
Larissa, good quality counts?
Yeah, I think it will go more into hopefully a D2C model. I think what I think is not what I think is not what I hope will happen. I think it should be hybrid. So I can tell you what I think it should be. So I think it should be hybrid, and it should be between, you know, federations going get closer to the fans, but using the broadcasters and the production companies to helping them producing that premium angle, but also helping them to kind of work through that super high fragmentation and using AI and so on to make that work. But it could go much worse than this. So.
Mike, please bring us home.
Well,
with hope.
Without wanting to summarize my speech again, which you probably don't want to hear. Look, I think sport only gets more important. So I think we will be talking about it as much, and other people will be talking about it too. I think we will see a multiplicity of models out there. I think we will see some streamers taking out some major properties at a global level. That hasn't happened yet, but I think those days will come. But it's not happening to everybody, and I think you'll have, you know, a middle ground of people doing roughly what they're doing today, you know, scrapping for a good broadcast deal, because that's still the best money available out there. I think you will see more D2C, but not because it's a great idea, but because some people run out of alternatives. And I think you will see all the low-end models in play as well. You'll see more on YouTube, because that's a way to get stuff out there if you can't find a broadcast deal or something like that. So I think everything is going to be in play. I think all the versions that we've talked about, they're all going to coexist. I don't think one wipes the floor with everything else.
Perfect. So there is hope. And the production volume is high. There is, let's say, a lot of work to do. help us to create content as a best possible layer with, let's say, lean and fast and smart workflows. Thank you very much for this very interesting panel, and we proceed with, thank you.